Over a decade ago, God put a clear call to plant a new life-giving church here in the city of Pearl. And in July of 2011, 7 people gathered in my wife Heather and I's living room in Flowood, Mississippi. And at that point, we didn't know what it would be called. We didn't know where we would plant. We didn't know who was going to show up or how we were going to pay for it, or even where we were going to meet. But we knew that God had big plans because He had called us to it. Across about a year and a half of getting to know people in the city, and my wife and I moving from Flowood to Pearl and creating relationships, the team of 7 grew to a team of 15, which grew to a team of 35. And we set launch day for August 12, 2012. God opened up a place called Kids Rock, which was a birthday party inflatable business here in Pearl, and that's the place where God set up for the exchange to call home as we began to launch. And so on August 12, 2012, we launched inside of Kids Rock with 123 people. We met in Kids Rock for 5 months, and within a week they changed the type of business they were, and so we were forced to find a different place to meet. And the school district here in Pearl was so gracious to allow us to begin to meet inside of Pearl Elementary cafeteria. We knew that portable life wasn't going to be something that would be sustainable long-term here in the city, and so we began to look for a place to meet that would have a little more permanence to it. And that's when we ran across Bright Shopping Center. And in July 2013, after 7 months of renovation, we moved into Bright Shopping Center as an 11-month-old church, completely debt-free, but still with no idea of what God was about to do through this spiritual family. Things really began to take off, and by year 3, we had gone from 1 worship gathering on Sunday to 2. Just a year and a half later, we moved from 2 gatherings to 3 as God was continuing to send new people to this spiritual house. And we knew that we really needed more space to expand, to welcome as many people as possible. And perhaps the most heartbreaking thing during that season as a pastor who was longing to reach people, and our staff team longing to see people far from God connect with Christ, was that we knew that there were people who were coming to our gatherings and they felt like there wasn't room for them. And so we seriously began to pray about more space, because we had occupied all of the 10,000 square feet we had here at Bright Shopping Center.
And I remember the ongoing conversation about the need for space, and God was richly blessing what was happening at the exchange. We accumulated a team of about 10 or 12 guys and really just began thinking about, praying about, and pursuing possibilities. A lot of buildings brought to the table in that initial meeting. And there was a lot of excitement around that, if I'm just being totally honest. What about the possibility of this space? What about the possibility of that space? And the reality was, we began chasing hard. We began running fast.
One of the places I remember that got mentioned was Rankin Square Shopping Center. It was a special place because it was a place that I remember when I was in junior high was a bowling alley. And now to think about what would that look like for us to entertain the option of putting a church there.
When we really first identified Rankin Square as an opportunity, it was for lease. When I tried to say, hey, y'all need to quit talking about Rankin Square and we need to pursue other options because it's just not going to happen.
In April of 2020, we got the call that one of the spaces that we had really been focused on for the last 3 years inside of Rankin Square Shopping Center opened up.
I thought there may be an opportunity for us to discuss with current ownership on purchasing the building instead of leasing. Throughout the process, we were able to get in touch with the owner and start negotiations with the owner to the point that we were able to make an offer that was pretty solid in our opinion based off of the cash flow. But it was rejected. Not once, but twice. To the point that the owner basically washed his hands of us and said, hey, I just don't even want to talk to y'all anymore. We obviously had vision. We had been affirmed that this was the opportunity that we were supposed to chase. And to have a door shut in your face, it's discouraging.
I called Mike Turnbow, who's been a huge part of so much of our building and renovations across the 8.5 years of our church's history. And I called him on a Tuesday for us to meet with him on a Wednesday. He was going to come to the office and we were going to share with him that the door had been closed. And we scheduled the meeting for Wednesday, but after I hung up with him within an hour, he called me back and he said, something just happened and a conversation just went down and you need to know about it. So Mike shows up at my office the next day and he begins to tell me about a neighbor of his named Robert Brown. And he tells me that Robert and his business partner Lee owned Storage Choice business across the street from Rankin Square, and that they had been interested in purchasing Rankin Square as well.
We made an offer on the property and they refused it, so we just moved on. Maybe 2 or 3 years later, we made another offer on the property and they countered back more than they were asking for the property to start with. And so Lee just made the comment that maybe they don't want to sell. So we moved on. And this time I was living in Pearl, and I met my neighbor, Mike Turnbow. And he was doing some work for me here at the house, and we got to talking about church. I asked him where he went to church, and he was telling me. And I do not know how the shopping center come up, but I made the comment that we tried to buy it. Mike said our church did too. And I don't know if we left it at that, but I was telling Lee, I said, you know, a church is trying to buy that shopping center. And that's when Lee told me, he said, well, let's make it happen. And let's get this church involved in it.
I didn't have a clue what to expect walking into that meeting. Not a clue. Didn't know who we were meeting. Didn't realize Lee was going to bring his dog to the meeting until we showed up. And man, we walk into Storage Choice and we sit around a table, and man, there was just an amazing amount of just really peace in the situation. It wasn't a normal business meeting that I'm used to.
Here was a church hungry to expand. Here was a business also hungry to expand, and literally from the window in the room that we were sitting in, you could look across the parking lot and you could look at a vast open shopping center craving possibility.
We were able to make an offer with Storage Choice on the building that would allow us to purchase the building as a whole and subsequently subdivide it into halves. And that offer was almost twice the offer that we had made before. And it was rejected. And once again, we felt the door close because we were at our max. We could not give any more.
And I remember a conversation between Bryant and Brett and myself about what is our approach now. And I remember sitting at that table going, guys, I don't feel confident or comfortable standing on a leg that I don't have. I don't want to present ourselves to be something that we're not. And if Jesus chose the approach of humility, that should be our approach too.
So we gathered with Robert and with Lee on a Friday afternoon here at our building, and man, we just walked in to say, hey, we're so still interested in doing this together, but we've reached the max of what we can contribute to this deal. We can't offer any more. On Monday of that following week, I got a call from Lee Brumfield. And Lee began to share with me that, and they had prayed about it across the weekend, and that they would love to still make this deal happen. And in order to do that, they were willing to put in an additional $200,000 on top of what they had put in, leave us where we were, but we would still split it 50-50.
He was more excited about, the church coming to the shopping center. But the $200,000 didn't slow him down one bit. He said, give it to the church and let's roll.
So Storage Choice then took over negotiation, was willing to offer an additional $200,000, and they sent that offer in to the ownership, and the offer was accepted.
We couldn't even imagine what he was capable of doing, and we were willing to close the door on the deal. And he said, no, I got you. And then we closed the door again. No, I got you. Here's Robert and Lee. We close the door when the deal closes because we don't have enough money to put up a proper half. I got you. Robert and Lee gives an additional $200,000. Like, God somehow provided 3 times the money we had to buy the building. And then ultimately we end up with our portion of the building that we wanted for less than our original offer, which doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't, you cannot put it on paper and say that it makes sense. And in reality, there is no explanation but God.
as we're sort of still coming out of the global pandemic world, we're walking into 2021, and our staff team is doing with so much excitement because now, man, this opportunity is now seemingly even more and more reality. But we're entering 60 days of due diligence where Storage Choice would kind of check out their side of the shopping center, and we would examine our side to make sure there wasn't any red flags that would kind of pull us out of the offer. But as we ended that time, I'll never forget Monday afternoon, February the 8th. Due diligence was to end on February 9th, and I got a call from Lee Brumfield. And he said, man, we're so excited, right? I'm so excited about this partnership and what I believe God wants to do through the exchange when you guys can get into that space. And he just let us know how excited he was to be a part of that. And then the next day was Tuesday, February 9th, a day that became so significant in the journey.
I was headed down to stay all night with Lee in Gulfport. And I got the call that morning that he had been hit by a car. And I told Wes, I said, Wes, that ain't nothing to joke about. You know, I said, tell me what's going on. He said, Robert, I'm telling you the truth. I stopped my truck on 49. Got on my knees to ask God why. But anyway, I lost a good friend that day. Very good.
And one of the questions that I will ask God one day, given the opportunity, is why a man like that? We didn't have a lot of personal dealings with Lee, but over time we have found out that he was just such a gracious man, such a man of faith, and that he was always, always, always intentional about pointing people to the truth of Jesus, and he wanted to see that kingdom expand. So to receive that news, one was tragic because it was the loss of life. It was the loss of what was presenting itself to be an amazing partnership with an amazing man. But we also knew that that was day 60 of due diligence, and in the contract, day 60 of due diligence meant that money and investment in the property was no longer refundable, that there was now a financial investment in a property that we didn't know we were actually going to be able to pursue at this point.
Lee's family and Robert and all of their friends had so much that they were processing. The next day, actually, Robert calls me and he says, Brian, I just want to put your mind at peace that we're still going to pursue Rankin Square. And while there was a sense of joy and peace with us, man, we're still just carrying the weight of the loss of Lee's life because of the pivotal role that he was playing in this partnership.
Either Thursday or Friday, I would say, Robert called us again and said, you know, hey, we got bad news, the deal's off. We're not gonna be able to buy it. And that's heartbreaking, man. You know, because you put a lot of time and a lot of energy, and you've seen all these doors open, but you forget that those doors were closed first before God opened them.
That a few days later, this was after we had told the staff team, we had told the advisory board, and we had come to peace with it, that it wasn't gonna happen. Robert came back and said, Lee wanted this deal more for you than he did for us. And we want to honor Lee in making sure that this deal goes through the way that he wanted it to happen. And I can't tell you what that means. That a man who was firmly invested in a business and had little to no relationship with us saw the value in what we were doing and wanted it more for us than he did for himself. I think it just speaks to the mission and the vision of our house. I think it speaks to what God wants us to be a part of. And I think for me, every opportunity that we have to recall that moment, it builds confidence for the future that we will have more and more opportunities to not only impact people for the kingdom, but in the midst of doing that, we get to help continue and build the legacy of a man that barely knew us.
We couldn't get to the money. We couldn't borrow. So we really thought about just taking this as a loss and running. And this, again, is where the Lord intervened. Lee had 8 to 10 Planet Fitness gyms throughout the panhandle of Florida and Alabama. And he had sold them just before the COVID crisis. That's how the Lord was taking care of him. The week after his death, he received more funds from the Planet Fitness sale. And so there was the money to buy the shopping center. So that's how we know the Lord had his hand in it.
So as the paperwork processed and everything was headed towards closing, the date got set for Friday, April the 16th. I remember pulling up to the law office there in Brandon with Heather, and Brett joined us as well for that day. And it was really surreal. We stopped in the car before we went in and we prayed. Just a prayer of deep gratitude. Because a journey that had started over a decade ago, God had made another provision that had really blown our minds. And he'd shown his faithfulness in a way that we never, ever could have imagined. And as we signed on the dotted line that day, it was just another incredible reminder that God said, when I call, I will provide. And not only did God provide a building, but then he also provided the money to pay for the building in full. Jesus promised that he would build his church, and that it was never about a building, but that God would use the resources of a building, of a structure, to create a place where all people would be welcomed in, and truth would be proclaimed, and hope would be shown.
How did we get there? And how did the exchange end up at a closing table for 33,000 plus square foot down the road in Rankin County on the busiest 4-lane in Rankin County? And it was by nothing that we did.
The beauty of this journey is it came all the way, it progressed its way all the way to the point that the exchange's name was no longer even in the negotiations of the contract. The exchange did not purchase Rankin Square. We had to be completely removed from the negotiations, from the contract, from the initial signing. Our names had to be completely removed, and I can promise you this, no one saw that plan.
The shopping center needs a new life. We want to see that place grow. We want to see a new look on it, taken care of. And I think when you get your church in there, and we get our storage in the place, it will have a brand new look, and it's going to look tremendous. And I think it'll be something the city is going to be very proud of.
With the Exchange Church going there, it's going to revitalize that shopping center. Just the light and the hope, and God's people worshiping there. Y'all have always been good stewards, so I expect that it will just completely change. Just about anything that y'all touch or you do as a church as a whole, it's always, y'all always leave things standing tall, or y'all make things look right, or y'all do it the proper way. I know y'all are going to be a good partner. Y'all are a good partner in everything that you do with the city. It's a great day for the Exchange Church, and it's a great day for the city of Pearl.
And to know that we are fixing to occupy 3 times the amount of space that we have, be able to re-envision layout and processes, and across the street from a brand new school to have an apartment complex literally in our backyard, to have thousands of rooftops immediately behind us that we have not yet impacted in our city, brings so much excitement and enthusiasm, because the possibilities are endless.
We're a house that loves to take what's old and make it new through the power of Jesus. And so, man, my excitement is that we're going to take a building that a lot of people have viewed as an eyesore for a long time, and through the provision of God and through the provision of his people and generosity, of people, we're going to be able to take that place and take what's old, and we're going to be able to breathe the new life of God's Spirit into it, not only in a way of renovation, but in a way of giving life and hope and truth to our community. You know, as I try to think about the journey of the Exchange the last decade and the provisions and the miracles that God's worked, I love what my friend Ken says. He says it's really like living in a Bible story. And so often we can say, man, why don't we get to see the miracles like the people did in the Bible? And the reality is we're living in a modern day miracle of a decade plus of watching God take 7 people in the living room and now open the doors to an opportunity to reach hundreds or thousands of people in our city, in our community, and beyond through God's plan and God's provision of His house. The God story that you just heard is the amazing news that we shared with our church family on Sunday, May the 2nd, that God has answered years of prayers for more space to create more opportunities to reach people who are far from God. God's opened the doors to over 33,000 square feet of space inside of the Rankin Square Shopping Center on 5 acres of land on the main thoroughfare, Highway 80, right here through the heart of the city. And not only has God provided the building, but He also had provided the resources for us to pay for it in full. As we celebrate God's faithfulness and His provision of more space for the Exchange family, I'm asking you to do 3 things in the coming season. First, I'm asking you to be patient. The story that you heard and the story that has happened has taken not only a year, but multiple years of praying and waiting and negotiating and then God providing. Over the next few months, you're maybe not going to hear a whole lot from us as we're in plans and processes with architects and contractors to lay out the plans for this space to make it a welcoming home for as many people as possible in our community. So we're all going to be patient as we wait over the next season for God to reveal what our next steps will be in the timeline for that. Second, I'm asking you to be prayerful. To be prayerful in a couple of ways. First, be prayerful in prayers of praise and thanks and gratitude to God. God has exceeded all of our imaginations and expectations in the provision of this space. So let's praise Him for that through prayer. Second, I'm asking you to pray, how does God want to use you in this process? You heard earlier that the building has been paid for in full. But now as we lean in to draw out plans to map out a space that would be welcoming to as many people as possible, this will now come at a cost. So I'm asking you just to begin praying. How does God want you to respond in obedience and faithfulness and in sacrifice to His response of faithfulness and provision for our family? And third, I'm asking you, will you be a part? Will you be a part of the movement of God's Spirit that has taken place over the last 8.5 years that will lead us into the next season? You know, I'm convinced that God's favor and His faithfulness flows towards those who walk in obedience and surrender and trust in Him. And so over the next season, will you be a part of what God's doing right now? You see, before you can be a part of what's next, you got to be faithful with where you are right now. And the mission of the Exchange is not on pause until we walk into a new structure, but the mission of the Exchange will continue to be every day, every moment, loving and serving our city, our community, and beyond, and pointing people to the hope of Jesus. And so I'm asking you, will you be a part right now? Will you be a part of serving? Will you be a part of making disciples? Will you be a part of inviting people into faith and hope in Jesus? Will you be a part of pursuing Jesus personally, however He calls you to do that? Will you be a part of what God is doing right now? So as we prepare for what's next, will you be patient? Will you join us in being prayerful? And finally, will you be a part as we look forward to what God continues to do in the next season to come?